I always, we're taping.
Welcome
and this
back.
is the most awkward part ever. Guys,
I'm here.
Katie's back. I'm back. We're back. We haven't
back.
been on the couch actually in a very long time.
Yeah.
Together.
It feels familiar. It feels the same.
It
as
does.
when we
Aren't you
left
happy the couch is back?
Yeah.
We felt the table
I
was.
like the table.
Oh, but it was just more of like an what am I trying to say?
I vote yes for the couch. The couch
Yeah.
is good.
Interrogation. I didn't like the table. I'm like, sit down at our interrogation table.
I was just saying, so
Hound you with questions.
to Erin, who we're going to introduce here, but I was saying that on the couch I do feel a bit like Drew Barrymore-ish.
Ooh.
No, like I don't know. Like, do you see that?
yeah,
it's a little
I could
creepy.
do that.
Like, and she's like, how are you?
We were saying to
Like,
Erin,
let
we're
me
probably
brush
going to
your
end up
hair.
touching her by the end of the by the end of the episode. We get a little bit
But the couch is
comfortable.
more comfy, so
Oh, well,
yeah,
I
couch is
mean,
comfy.
Katie, do you want to introduce our next guest?
yeah, I can do my best. As I mentioned, we have Erin here, and Erin made a really long commute to be here with us today. We were just kind of discussing like how our podcast will be today. It's been a really long time for me, so we're kind of just going to be jumping in, but you have a lot to share with us about some loved ones and about your own little journey as well. Not little journey, but
Your
big journey.
See, she's already
Your big,
touching
huge,
you.
giant-
Do you feel that? I hope you're okay with that, petting you.
giant journey. We should have like a little like consent form. Oh, the mic. We should have a consent form.
If that's allowed or
People
not.
come in.
I had my hair all 60 minutes of the podcast.
Lovely. But do you want to like introduce yourself? Tell everybody why you're here today.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Erin Brown. I am from Bobcaygeon, Ontario, or the Kawartha Lakes, Lindsay area. I have a business called the Bloomprint, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I went to school. Do we want that much of a
Yeah,
background?
absolutely.
I want to know everything.
Sure.
So I
we
went
want to know
to
it
school
all.
in Kingston. I went to Queen's University, and part of why I'm here is my little brother also went to Queen's University for the 4 years following me, and I think that's kind of what has connected me and Tamara is just the shared loss. It's very different, but still
loss is a
similar
loss.
struggles. Yeah.
Now, Erin, what did you go to school for?
I did a Bachelor of Science with a specialization in kinesiology.
Okay, amazing.
Wow.
Share with us what you do for a living, because I also find that super cool.
Oh, okay, cool. So I am a rehabilitation services specialist with Canadian veterans. So I work one-on-one with vets who've been released from the military for medical reasons for the most part.
Okay.
And then kind of help them transition into civilian life, whether that's getting them the physical, mental help that they need, or also doing like the vocational counseling and kind of helping figuring out like what is suitable for them now based on the limitations.
What's
that they
life
have.
now
Yeah,
kind of
what's
thing.
life now. So
I imagine that would be really challenging, especially to trying to navigate your own grief.
Yeah. And I actually got this job. So I started this job 2 weeks before my brother's accident. And that was like a whirlwind. So I tried to go back really quickly, like pretty much immediately after everything kind of came to a halt, and then ended up going off on a leave about 3 months later.
Right.
I just like couldn't
Caught up with you.
No, yeah. Like I'm like listening, even just whenever like normal conversations, like you're listening to other people share what they're complaining about or what they're upset with, and you kind of just want to shake them because you're just like, are you kidding me?
I feel that.
Like that is what you're like.
I'm trying to have sympathy for you right now, but it's not happening.
And granted, there was definitely like, but on the other hand, like working with people with like severe mental health, it's like I just didn't have the space for it.
No.
And I just felt like a bit of like an imposter with like being able to actually give them the help that they needed. And so I just had to take a bit of a step back. Now I feel like it actually, my experiences allows me to connect with them on a deeper level than I think some of my colleagues have, because like, for example, PTSD is a huge diagnosis that Canadian veterans get, and that's a diagnosis that I have. And so like being able to understand the demands of the therapy that you have to do versus like kind of being someone who's never had to go through that firsthand, it's like I have a little bit more, I can give them a little bit more insight and like preparation for what to
You've been through it.
Nice. Yeah.
Builds-
I've been through it.
You've been through it.
Yeah. I feel like I could be the therapist now, but
Like what you say, and I love when you say it, is like you quite literally hit the basement of rock bottom.
Yes.
You get it.
Yeah, 100%.
What were you going to say, Kate?
I was just, it's not that good now.
No, tell me.
I was just going to say that it also probably builds trust with those people as well.
Rapport, yeah.
Sure. Like I've had people who like have epic meltdowns and just are like, you don't understand what it's like, and like they describe all their symptoms with PTSD, and they go on, and I'm like very reserved, like I don't just tell anyone that I have mental health problems.
That's fair.
It's not really how you lead in like the professional world, but if there's ever a situation where they feel like extremely misunderstood and it's preventing them from like taking that step, like that's when I kind of open that door, and I'm like vulnerable with them, and I'm like, hey, like I have been in your shoes, and like look at where I am now, like I'm helping you take that first step, and so they feel like a lot more like seen and heard.
I love that.
So, it's good.
Chills. That is so incredible.
Yeah, I imagine.
So Erin, you kind of loosely, mentioned that you are someone who lives with deep grief.
Yes.
Can you enlighten us a little bit on where that grief comes from?
Yes. So I guess we'll open the can of worms.
We'll open
I would love
big old
to know
can.
about your brother.
So my little brother Liam, he died in March of 2022.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We're big on tears here.
Oh yeah.
Oh fuck! I swear
Tamara
all the
always
time.
says.
Okay.
I feel like I swear less here than I do in real life. Oddly, like I feel like I never
swear more
swear
here than I do in
She
real life.
swears more here and like never swears outside, and I swear all the fucking time.
I'm passionate
and never swear here
So
on
yes,
the podcast.
the answer is yes.
Perfect.
Please.
Okay. So
Tell me about Liam first. Like, so he's your little
He's my
brother.
little brother.
Okay. And went to Queens.
Went to Queens as well. Stupid smart, like annoying smart. Like I was the kid who like had to do my homework unless if I wanted to like try to get an 80 or an 85. Whereas like he barely had to go to class and he would walk away with like 95 to like 100. Like he was just like brilliant.
Yeah.
But I think as the older sister, you're just like, man, fuck you. Like why not me?
Yeah. This is unfair.
So anyways, just like honestly absolutely brilliant and just so charismatic, had like such an energy about him, like such a positive influence over people, and like such a huge heart, loved kids, like loved animals.
What was growing up like? Did you guys get along like through your childhood?
Well, I'd say a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like we were pretty close like when we were younger, and then I think I got to that age where I'm like, I don't want to hang out with my little brother anymore, like that's not cool. And then there became an age I was probably like, honestly, probably like 17 in and around when he was starting high school, and people were like, man, your brother's unreal. And I'm like, yeah, he is.
Yeah, that's my brother.
He looks up to me.
I'm like, yeah, we're best friends.
How
so
much?
funny.
What was the difference? Like the age
3
difference?
years.
3 years. Okay,
Yeah.
so you guys are fairly close.
Oh yeah, we were fairly close. Like we grew up. We both played rugby, so that kind of we both played sports. Like we were super, super active. Shout out to mom and dad driving us everywhere.
Hey, mom and dad.
Yeah. But rugby was like the main sport that we both ended up like taking on like as we got older. So I played rugby at Queens for the 4 years I was there.
Yeah.
I captained for 3 of the 4 years that
Wow.
I was there. And then he came right after me, and he played for the 4 years as well. So like which we'll get into, just like the different communities we shared. Like we had a community at home, like Lindsay, Ontario. Like we had the Rugby Canada community. We had the Kingston Queens community.
Wow.
Like it just it was really wild when we did lose him. Just the support that kind of came from like every single direction. It was insane. But anyways, that kind of brings me into the nitty gritty of it all. Is so March 2022. It was actually March 4th, so it was the Friday. It was the same day that the Canadian government, Ontario government had, what do you want to call, lifted
The restrictions
need for
or
the COVID passport.
Okay.
In restaurants and bars.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, I don't know if you've ever been to Kingston. Kingston's like wild downtown.
Oh, absolutely.
Did
The
you
strip.
just say, have we ever been?
I don't know. But, like,
We don't.
Sometimes.
Oh, yes. Have we ever?
A handful of times.
Okay. So,
I go to Kingston just to walk around Home Sends like once a week.
Okay.
Maybe
Never buy
twice a week.
anything.
She did that twice a week last week.
I love it. So anyways, yeah,
It does have a wild crowd downtown, especially with Queens.
Especially at the Queens.
Yeah.
Got it out of hand, if I'm being honest. But
Yeah.
so that night, like the footage we saw was just like nuts. Like I was there for 4 years. I visited in the 4 years Liam was there. Like it was like packed. So to make a long story short, Liam had gone out to one of the popular bars in Kingston and was severely overserved. And he ended up falling downstairs and hitting his head.
Gosh.
He was intubated at the scene. Looking back, it's kind of one of those things where, did he die then? Did he die a week later? Like, what do you want to chalk it up to?
Right.
But yeah, so basically how I found out about it is I got a phone call March 5th around like 3:30 in the morning. And originally, so I'm going to dial back from the seriousness of this. My little brother, like Liam used to call me when he was alone coming home from the bar and would be like, I just had a great night and I met this person that you went to school with.
Okay,
just, like,
yeah. Unwind.
like unwind or just whatever. He would really call like probably lots of people who would pick up. So when his name came up on my phone, I kind of was like, oh God, here we go
again.
I honestly feel like the first or second time I might have like ignored it, and then it came through again. And whenever I answered the phone, it wasn't his voice. It was his roommate's voice.
Wow.
And that kind of just like made my stomach sink a little bit. It was like, all right, what's going on? And I remember sitting up and he was like super shaky, super nervous, and just like, Liam hit his head. We're not allowed in the hospital because of COVID restrictions. Don't even get me started on that. So he's in there by himself.
Oh,
and they won't tell them what has happened because they're not family. So,
but family isn't there at this point.
So he's by himself, and like nobody knows where he's at, what's going on, what the status is. Like I get there's protocols, but it was just like such an awful feeling to picture that and picture him there.
Absolutely.
So I like get out of bed, like I'm like, okay, I'm on my way, and in my mind I'm kind of thinking like, oh, it's just a concussion, like he just needs someone to come and get him and like be there for him, whatever. And as I'm like getting my clothes on and getting at the door, I'm like having this like sinking feeling of like, okay, wait, what did he just say? So I ended up calling Wells back and like asked him all the same questions over and over again, just being like, what happened?
You were in shock at this point.
Like, just like there's no way. And then at this point I really realized like something serious was going on. Like I don't think I was getting like the full story. It was just like he was like very, very much not okay, and they were really concerned about him, and we needed to get there as soon as possible.
And you were 2.5 hours away at this point too?
Did your parents know at this point?
No.
They called, oh gosh,
no.
okay.
So then my parents were about 2 minutes from me, so on my way, I like went to their house to try to get them, knocked on the door, like no one woke up. And honestly, at this point, I just was like, I just need to fucking go.
Yeah.
So I left, and I hit the road, and I called my husband, and I was like, you gotta go wake up my mom and my dad.
Yeah.
Like, kind of explained to him more, because I had called Wells in the car, and I just, like, remember flying. Like, at
this point, you're like,
flying.
Yeah.
I was, like, probably going, like, I remember one point I looked down, I was going, like, 190.
Oh, my
gosh. And I didn't even, like, flinch. Like, I, like, looked at it, acknowledged it, and, like, kept going.
Yeah. We're getting there.
Now. But it was just, like, wild. Like, I didn't give a fuck about anything else. And it was, like, I needed to go.
Yep.
So on the way down there, I ended up calling the hospital at Kingston and being like, my brother's in emerge. I need to know what's happening. Like, I need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
At this point, my husband's waking up my parents and trying to get a hold of them. And then I got put on the phone with a doctor. Ironically, his name was Dr. Messenger.
Oh my God,
and I was
weird.
like,
What?
now thinking about it, I'm like, isn't that fucking
Messenger?
Like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Ouch.
But anyways, like, it was then that, like, I really knew that something was, like, he used the words, if he makes it.
Oh, Jesus.
And it was, like, at that point,
Yeah.
I was like, holy fuck. Like,
This is a big deal.
yeah, like, my life is, like, flipping upside down. Not my life, like, our life is flipping upside down in, like, an instant. So,
often, sorry to interrupt you, like, often people will say, will think, like, it's the moment when somebody passes, but it's the moment when you're put in that situation. Mm-hmm. That's when you start to kind of disassociate. Absolutely. And, like, okay, like, my life has changed.
And have the trauma.
That's when it starts.
The trauma, and it doesn't end there either.
No.
Like, it just grows
Keeps
from there.
going, accumulating, So you finally arrive, or you're talking to the doctor.
At that point, I had to call my mom and my dad, and, like, I just, there's certain things, like you're saying, that, like, compound, and, like, hearing my mom and my dad, like, immediately, like, scream and cry and be, like, completely beside themselves. It was, like, that's the shit that you never forget. Doesn't matter how much therapy you do, how many, like, whatever strategies you
just
do,
that
how many
visual. I can
like,
see it now.
Like, I can hear it now, like, even just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I had to call my sister. I had to let her know. And then eventually I got to the hospital. And at that point, like, we knew half of his skull was being removed because the pressure was so big.
Bad. Yeah.
We knew that he was in surgery. And again, the doctor just was like, if he makes it. That's just like whatever the conversation followed for that.
And you're also like bearing the weight of being the only one there. And as a child, like I'm sure that you're the same. We've chatted, before this started, that you just want to like take care and like trying to take care of your parents and try to protect everybody from like what you're experiencing is challenging.
Like,
and I'm sure that
make this easier to swallow than
and having to like deliver all of that is a lot.
For sure. And I think it's also hard too, because like growing up, your parents are the ones who take care of you.
Yep.
And I feel like throughout that, I felt like I was taking care of them.
You need to be strong for them.
I needed to be strong for them.
Of course. Yeah.
And it was really, really hard.
Yeah, of course.
Because you just kind of like, and not even in a bad way, like I have no resentment towards them at all around it. It's just like you lose your parents in that moment as well when they lose a child. Like it's just completely changes them. It completely changes like your relationship. And I think there's not really much you can do about that. Like that's just what happens when you go through something so like traumatic and unfair like this.
Yeah.
But anyways, to like kind of, so
he had just had the surgery.
Yeah.
And your family was on the way.
We all went in and we were there for so that was all March 5th. We all were there. My sister, my mom, my dad, everyone got there at some point during that day. And then we were there for several days. Queens was amazing. They put us up in a hotel. They like took such good care of us. It was very much like the Queens like varsity community.
Yeah,
that, like,
absolutely.
Stood behind us for sure. But they just like, we were like, Lululemon in Kingston gave us underwear and socks and like a sweater.
My
like each of
gosh.
us, like it just, Liam used to work at Lulu.
Okay.
I used to work at Lulu. Like,
okay.
It was just like wild. Just
a
like
community coming together.
It was overwhelming. Like,
because you have so many other things that you're worried about in that
that
moment.
you wouldn't think
but,
to
like,
just
you
like bring a
clothes.
sweater.
You're just like go. Like I'm pretty sure I had like pajama pants on. Like I don't think that I even really got dressed, but
right.
Anyways, so it's kind of like up and down. Like, is he gonna make it? And it's hard because like we had to share online. Like initially I took to online and was like, what the hell happened? Like at this point we didn't know what happened. We didn't know that he had fallen down the stairs. Like I'm thinking that there's something more sinister involved. Like
did something do
fight?
Yeah, 100%. And then so the messages were just like flooding. Like I probably had like hundreds and hundreds of messages. Wow. It was insane.
Yeah, it was probably difficult for you to read through.
Yeah, and I felt like I was just in like, I don't even know what
survival mode.
Survival mode, business mode. Like I'm like, I gotta fucking figure out what has happened.
Yeah, I'm big sister. It's me.
Like we're making this happen now.
Yeah.
And there was like so much benefit to that because there was so much like positivity coming in and like it gave us hope. But then there was also like all these people sending messages of like these wild survival stories, like people who were in coma for 30 days or 6 months.
And then came out of it.
Out, like, hold on, he's going to make it. And it's like, you're like, fuck yes. Like, yes, he will.
Yeah.
And I think
it plays with your mind.
That was like, you're like built up to this point. And it was the Tuesday when he had to have imaging done on his spinal cord to see if it was still intact. And it was all good. We like finally got like one good news, and I don't know if you have this experience, but like when you're in the hospital with a loved one, like you just end up like obsessing over those numbers on the screen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you are. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, so that needs to come down, and if it comes down, then that's a good thing.
He can be weaned off of this, and absolutely.
Yeah. And you just start to like ask a million questions. The nurses at KGH in the ICU are just like a different breed of human.
Oh, they have to be.
Like,
They'd have to be.
Yeah, just incredible. But anyway, so it was the Tuesday, and he was good. We finally got like good feedback. Like before that, it was like, this is like grave. Like he is not well. Like if he survives, like he's not going to have a good quality of life. Like we knew what we were dealing with. And then to get that like imaging come back and it's like, yep, his spinal cord's intact. Like this is great. And so you just start to tell yourself, you're like, okay, well, maybe all these success stories
coming out of it.
He's going to be the miracle. He's going to be the one who turns around. And like, at that point, like my family had like, my parents went back, my sister went back to like sleep. The nurse finally took a break and like
everyone could kind of breathe.
Relaxed. And like I was sitting beside him still, and I just was like, you fucking got this, and like talking to him the whole time. And then I noticed like his forehead started to like he had all these like incisions all over his head because of the different imaging and sensors and everything, and it had started to bleed. So my husband my boyfriend at the time, he like got up to go get a nurse and like obviously she had taken a break finally, like, and I have no hard feelings around that at all. And so I kind of was like, I'm his fucking big sister. Like, I've seen them clean this before. Like, it was where the camera was, like, pressure. Yeah. Like, I can do this. Like, no issues. So I, like, got up and I, like, went to get a Band-Aid and the gloves, and I had everything on. And at this point, like, the way he was elevated, he was super elevated in the bed. Absolutely. So when you sat next to him, you're, like, under him almost. Yeah. So by the time I stood up and I'm, like, looking at his forehead and I'm, like, about to just, like, change this Band-Aid, like, I realized, like, I was staring back at, like, a fist size of his brain. And his brain had actually herniated through his forehead. Oh, Erin. And at that point, it was just, like, I can't even explain to you. Like, we talked about shock earlier. Like, shock of, like, that moment was, like, another level. Mm-hmm. And to just, like, realize so harshly in that moment that he wasn't coming. Okay. Yeah, that he was gone. And there was no hope. Like, there was so much hope in that. Like, hold on to that hope, because hope is something. Literally 20 minutes before, we're like, he's good. He's good. Like, his spinal cord's good. Like, we knew that we were still heading in, like, a really tough direction, but it was like, no, like, we're good. We've got this. But, like, I remember, like, I was texting my family. I was like, his pressure's coming down. Like, his pressure's coming down. Like, this is incredible. Like, so it's like, you get the good news about the imaging. The pressure's coming down. Well, the pressure's coming down because, like, his brain was no longer, like, within his skull at that point. Yeah. So it's just like, yeah, it was. So at this moment, like, this is happening right in front of you. Yeah. Yeah, it felt like someone poured, like, boiling water on me and just felt like everything. And just kept burning. Left. Yeah. And I don't even remember, like, there was a family room at the Kingston ICU, and I remember being there and, like, just, like, losing my fucking mind. Yeah. And then being in the family room. Like, I don't remember getting there. I don't remember, like, anything. And I remember, like, again, then we're having to call my mom and my dad and my sister and everyone and bring them back and be like, were they away? They had finally gone and taken a break. Yeah. Wow. So it's just like, you and I talked before, like, what was the emotion that, like, you've held on to? And, like, for me, it was anger, because it was just like, part of me in a way was like, why the fuck, like, why me? Like, why was I the one that had to witness that? Like that? Yeah. Like, why did I have to see my brother in that way? Because, like, you so badly want to hold on to the good memories, but it was so hard to do that. Does it frustrate you, like, in those moments with the shock? I sometimes, it does frustrate me when I'm like, why can't I just understand what my brain is doing? Like, it gets so confusing. Like, when you say, I don't know how I made it from one room to another. Mm-hmm. I know it's there to protect us, but it's almost, like, frustrating in the fact that, like, I can't make sense of it. Yeah. I can't make sense of those moments. It's just disconnected. Completely. Yeah. And I think it's like, there's so much of my anger, like, when you think of how he died, because in my mind, it's like, that week was just, like, that week was painful for us. Yeah. More than it was for him. Yeah. And how he died was, like, so avoidable and so preventable, and, like, tragic. If a billion different things could have been changed, he would still be here right now. Yeah. And I think the reality is like, it could have literally been anyone. And I think that's why it did rock so many communities that he was a part of. And it did rock so many communities that he wasn't a part of, because, like, we've all been to the bar and had too much. Oh, and like being in situations where, like, we had, like, someone finally cut us off, or someone finally got us home in bed safely. And, like, that didn't happen in this situation. And, like a kid died. Like, he was 22. He was a month out from graduating his, like, university degree. Like, a month out. The anger that I felt from that, and my dad walked the stage for him too at graduation, which, like, talk about ripping your fucking heart open. Yeah. Man. So it's just, like, it's just so but it's, like, senseless, right? And it just is, like, shouldn't have happened. And I think I've heard Tamara say this a lot too, and, like, maybe, I'm sure it's so frustrating for you to hear advice from anybody who hasn't, like, lived through what you're going through. And I can only, contribute to what I've felt from Tamara and been through with Tamara. But, like, you could make yourself crazy thinking about, like, why me? What, like, why did this have to happen to me? And we say it all the time. Like, sometimes there's just not a reason. There's just I remember, it was, like, the next day, and I remember, like, with all my friends in bed, and we were just sitting there, and I was just sobbing, and I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And my sister looked at me, and she just said, sometimes we don't have a reason. Mm-hmm.
And some things are just, we just don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, you know how powerful that is, because as humans, we want a reason for everything. We want an explanation for it all. And there sometimes just isn't, and how maddening that can be, you know, and I'm sure you trail back to that often, you know, like why him, why us, why this, again, things could be so different. And it's the same thing in my situation too. Like why, you know, and there's just no answer to it.
No.
There's no right reasoning for it.
None. No. And I think like that's why in my situation, like anger just kind of consumed me, because it was just like there was no reason for it. Like at the time, like I didn't see a lesson. I didn't see a purpose. I didn't see a message. Like it was just like, this was fucking senseless.
Would you say that was one of the like the immediate challenges you faced was anger?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anger, I would say in terms of immediate challenges, to be honest, was not being the person that people were used to me being.
Oh yeah. Oh, we're not angry people.
Yeah, like, and I just
not angry people.
Yeah, and I just remember like seeing people, and like my instant like reaction response was to be like happy and like upbeat and like
because you want to take care of the people that are around you.
Yeah, and you're so not used to being the person who's being taken care of or being thought of. Like I'm the thoughtful friend. I'm the one who like.
I'm the one they come to when they're in need.
Yeah, it's not like I've never really been in a situation like this. So it's just like.
It's a vulnerable place to be, especially if you're always the one on the other side of giving. And I think too, like when we think about anger, like anger really is like all these other emotions, but anger is there to protect you from what you're feeling. Do you feel like that anger has like transitioned into other emotions that you're feeling now, or do you still feel like you're sitting with a lot of anger?
I think I'm sitting with less anger.
Yeah.
How do I get there?
Therapy.
When Tamara's like, we're not angry people, I was going to be like, unless Tamara's drinking tequila.
Not always. That's not always. I'm fun on tequila usually, just when people trigger me.
Yeah.
Depends who's there.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I would say that like the anger piece, I don't know, it just kind of evolves. Like, I also think too, this is something I've kind of learned, is like we say anger, but like there's so much more to it.
There's always a thing underneath like, the anger.
Is it grief? Is it guilt? Is it like shame? Is it like resentment? Is it bitterness? Like, like we just say anger because like that's what we're familiar with. But like I remember I have two therapists. Doubled up. And one of the therapies that I did was very specific to trauma and like different things like that, because like I had a lot of like just like impact on my daily life and like, how I lived and everything like that. So like I really hit a point where it's like, okay, the therapy, it was my personal therapist who I still see now, Vanessa Hogue, if you're listening.
Shout out. Shout out to Vanessa.
But she basically was like, hey, like I think you need to go like a little bit more in depth with like the trauma work, and that's not something that like I'm skilled in doing, or not skilled but trained in doing, like, and gave me a kind of a recommendation forward. And I remember sitting in this new therapist's office, and she had this pillow, and it was like anger was written in red, but then like probably like 40 different words were like around it on this pillow. And it was just like, I remember looking at it being like, fuck.
Yeah. You felt called out in that.
And that.
Yeah.
And it was just so funny. Like she hadn't even come in the room yet. And I was like, interesting.
It's already impacting.
Go.
But we're not taught that.
Yeah, no. And I think like growing up, even like I don't know, you go through such a like trauma and such a loss that you immediately start to reflect on like, how the fuck could I not have been prepared for something like this to happen in my life? And like I looked at the school system and I'm like, we don't talk. I think now they might talk about mental health, but like we didn't talk about mental health back then.
No way.
I've never heard of the word grief until like
until you're going through
like,
it.
I've lost grandparents, different things like that. Like I never talked about grief.
It's being recognized in the DSM now.
Is it?
As like a condition.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Crazy,
that. That is crazy. But it's just like wild. It's like, why don't we talk about this? Like there are kids who lose their parents. There are kids who lose their siblings. Yeah. Like
grief can come in so many different forms. So then I say this a lot too. It's not just the loss of somebody. It's we grieve a lot of people that are still alive too. Relationships so much. So I mean, and like the whole 5 stages are bullshit. You know, that's palliative care, research based. But it's quite literally devastating that we never talk about grief.
Yeah.
Because it does have such an impact on us. And it's something that we're all going to have to deal with at one point or another.
Exactly. Like every single one of us is going to have to deal with grief in some capacity at some point in our lives. And like, how did I get to the 25? And that was the first time I
heard of grief.
it, or had talked about it,
Yeah.
or had like labeled it.
Same.
Like, it was nuts.
It's also hard when you're experiencing your own grief and you have others around you grieving as well. And like, you know, I've experienced that like with Tamara too, because like we loved Gwen, like
whole community again was shocked.
We were
Like,
grieving
just
that,
similar,
right?
very
And
similar.
then so I'm just thinking like for your parents and your siblings and things like that, right? You're trying to manage your own self and heal your own self and take accountability for your future and your feelings. Like, how did that impact the rest of your family? Have you guys come closer together? Has there been challenges that you guys have faced together?
Yeah, there's
Because everyone grieves differently.
Everyone grieves differently, and I think, again, like, every loss is different, but the same loss is different for everyone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Your
Like,
parents.
and I think
100%.
that I felt like so consumed and overwhelmed, and this is like unique to me. It's like, and so it's like you lose a sibling, and sibling grief's a bit weird. Like, it's not as like well recognized. I'm gonna be totally honest.
Yeah.
Like, the grief of like a child or the grief of a parent,
Yeah.
like really young, like it's a lot more like, I don't want to say respected, but just like appreciated, I guess.
Maybe more understood.
Yeah, more understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas like siblings, it's like not everyone's super close with their siblings. So it's
Yeah.
like if people lose siblings and stuff, it's kind of like, like,
Yeah.
And the
whatever.
expectations from
Yeah.
siblings is different than the
Totally
expectations
different,
from a
yeah.
parent, right?
Yeah.
But let me validate you seriously, and like that loss and the grief that you're having, like
Totally.
Absolutely.
just because it's not, you know, as talked about doesn't mean that it's not existing and it's not as impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like going back to like I said earlier, like having to like watch your parents, we were talking about like taking care of them
Yeah.
Yeah.
through this time. Like that is how I felt, and that's how I have felt, and I think they obviously have taken care of me as well. But it's tough. Like it completely changes like your relationship, and like I have a great relationship with like my family, and like I love every single one of them. But it is hard when like you're grieving the same person.
Yes.
And like you yourself have so much anger for what you've lost.
Yeah.
And you have to like share the space with other people.
Yeah.
And like I think for a while, like as a kid of someone whose like siblings passed away, it's like for your parents you kind of want to be like, well, what about me? Like I'm still here.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like I remember like kind of thinking like, am I not enough? Like, am I ever going to be able to be like enough? And I think like that was a little bit of like I don't even know, like immature thing.
Well, it was
I mean,
maybe
it's
just like a
feeling
self-sabotage
too,
thing
yeah.
a little bit.
But I think like now, I think we've had some pretty my mom's a psychologist.
Okay.
there it is. There it is.
Yeah, so we've had some pretty like deep, like blunt, clear conversations. Like
Yeah.
I've had some very clear conversations like with my
Boundaries
mom,
and
with
things
my dad,
probably
with
too.
my sister. Yeah, like it's just it's hard. Like you get so consumed by your own grief that like you kind of don't realize how it's impacting the people around you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was a period of time where like my grief, like my parents were really worried about me. Like I was like very, very suicidal. I was very depressed. I didn't see a point. I'd lost a friend a month after Liam.
Okay.
She had 3 boys under the age of 5. Like I just was like,
What
the
is
fuck?
life?
Yeah, I was like, what's the point? Like, there's
yeah.
no rules, and I don't want to play anymore.
I
And
can
that's where
relate.
was at.
Yeah, like it's just ruthless. I can relate
Yeah.
with the whole like I don't want to share my grief because for a long time my mom, I wouldn't let her cry in front of me, and essentially my mom, because Gwen's father was in an accident, my mom was a caregiver to Gwendolyn for like the first 10 months of her life essentially, and I was just like, you can't cry in front of me. Like I'm your daughter. You need to show up for me. Like I'm the
Be
one
strong
hurting.
for
You
you.
need to be strong for me. You don't need to cry. And I feel so bad thinking of how I was with her before.
Right.
But now I'm like, you know, I want her to cry. I want her to have those emotions. But you do get so caught up in
You
that
just get so
grief.
territorial.
Yeah, you're
I
like,
think
you
a
don't
part
have a
of
right
that
to
too
cry.
is also wanting to like protect your mom from that too. Like
Yeah.
it's not happening.
Again, it's the same. I'm here, Mom. Be lucky because you used to tell me if anything were to ever happen to me, you wouldn't be able to live.
Right.
And I'm living.
Right, what you feared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I fare with that.
Yeah, it's super tough. It's super tough.
But I think it's a common thing.
I think so too, and I think like whenever
That's why death can bring out the best or the worst in
I
people.
think it brings out the worst and
Yeah.
the best.
And the best eventually.
both. The best
Hopefully it
eventually
gets
comes,
to that point.
hopefully.
Yeah.
But I also think that that's a choice. Like I really
Yeah.
do. Like I've really thought about like obviously with this podcast coming up, like
Yeah.
people go through terrible things
All
and
the
you know
time.
what? They become terrible people.
Yeah.
right? And I don't mean that to be like insensitive or take away from or invalidate what they've gone through, but it's like, at the end of the day, like we're all dealt cards, and like we
it's
have
how
to
you're
play
showing
what
up
we're
for
dealt.
yourself.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
like,
even if we don't want to play.
Yeah, even if you don't want to play, like at some point you have to deal. And that kind of leads me, one of the things that we talked about was like, what would you give to advice to someone who's like new in their grief? And I have two, and one is like, don't resist it.
Yeah,
Because,
you're right.
Like lean into it. Like the way
Go
I
right
look
through
at
it.
Right? Yeah, I'm like, the more you resist it, the more it builds, and the more it builds, the more you'll break down.
Oh, absolutely.
And like I resisted it for so long. I was like, nope, this is not real. This is not true. Like I won't accept this. Like, and then I just spiraled. And what you mentioned earlier, like I talked about, like I remember hitting this point of like rock bottom and was like, holy fuck. Like I went off work. I got on medication to try to like stabilize, because I was like very, very suicidal at the time.
Yeah.
And there was like about a week or two after that point where like I hit rock bottom's basement, and I just went through the floor, because it's like I just still was not letting myself feel. Like I was not letting myself feel at all. And so like I think if you're earlier in your grief, if you're late in your grief, if you're still struggling with your grief, like part of it is like regularly, consistently giving it room to do its thing.
She's gonna knock on your door, right? Come in, let her sit down, have a coffee, chat a bit, you know, and then when she leaves, see you again. Yeah. You know, hopefully not anytime soon, but I definitely will see you again.
You can't stay. You gotta go. I think like that's something, your time's
it's like
up.
a bad house guest, but you know, they're going to be back, but you just have to accept them while they're there. Yeah. And I get that. It's kind of like that famous quote, you know, it kind of goes like riding the waves, and some are big, some are small, but you got to learn to surf that. Yeah. Surf them. You know,
what? I've never heard that quote.
It's you. No, it is a quote. It's definitely a quote.
Have
Joey,
you heard
look it
that
up.
I've heard it.
Yeah. Us trauma people have a lot of quotes in our back of our fucking pocket.
You want to be a part of our club? Well.
That's a good one.
I have a question that I'm really curious to know about, because you mentioned that your dad walked the stage for your brother at graduation, and I heard you say my husband, and then you were saying at the time my boyfriend and my fiance. So you got married after this accident had happened. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've been with my husband for 10 years. So it was
okay. Wow.
It wasn't going to happen.
Of course.
But yes, we did get married, and I think that is an accomplishment in of itself.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know if people really appreciate, like, we're talking about sharing and whatever, being territorial over grief. Like, when you're barely taking care of yourself, and like you're barely surviving, and like also like typically your partner's like your safe space, and kind of can become a dumping ground for all of your shit when you're in the thick of it. Like it is so hard to maintain a relationship.
For sure.
Incredibly hard. And that kind of comes like the second thing that I would say to anyone who is like experiencing grief. And this came to me like rock bottom's basement. I'm calling my friend, and I'm like, I want to give up. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I was so mad at my husband. Or boyfriend, whatever you want to call him, Mitchell. I was so mad at Mitchell. I was so mad at the world. I was just angry at like anything with a pulse. And my friend was like, you have to force joy. And I was like, in the moment, I was like, I want to throat punch you for saying that.
Like, we're not friends
anymore. But we know it can coexist.
Understand. And I wasn't like welcoming the fact that like it can all coexist. It was like, if I wasn't outwardly depressed looking, it's like I wasn't going to get the validation I wanted. Yeah. And so it's like I had to wake up at one point whenever I was like sabotaging, and like my husband and I, like we hit a very, very low spot. And I genuinely was like, I'm going to lose everything that means anything to me. And
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's like really reassuring, you know, because I feel like in my relationship too, there's been some moments where it's like do or die. Yeah. You know, and it's so hard to see tomorrow, because right now it's just moment by moment in those tough times.
And I think a little bit of a trauma response is like all or nothing.
Oh, fuck
this,
yeah.
Like, catastrophizing. Yeah. So it's like you get in a fight and you're like, we're done.
Yeah.
Like we have to.
Girl, I've packed up my bag so many times, fight or flight. See you later. And Katie's like, you don't want this. Like last time, you know, you don't want this. I'm like, I don't. But like, where do I gotta go? Like I'm going out west.
I'm like, come down, lay in the hammock for a couple hours, read a book.
But it's true because you're so like your brain changes, and we know that when you're in that fight or flight stage, like that's all you know and that's all you're accustomed to, and now you're protecting yourself. You're running because there's a goddamn tiger behind you, or you think there is and there's not. But
it's an interesting perspective for sure, because you've lost so much. Just hearing you say, you know, I was about to lose everything in that moment when you lost your brother, Liam. I'm sure in that moment you felt like you've lost everything.
Oh, absolutely.
And then to have that like perspective and realization that like those things can coexist and there is still joy and love in your life, right? And I think knowing for yourself that you are deserving of those things is like such like an epiphany realization that you really have to like be in it to have. So when did you guys get married?
We got married October 2023, so we've been married like 6 months.
Okay,
fine.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah,
like 9 months. Okay, it was amazing, and I think
I loved watching all of your like
so
wedding
good.
prep,
and you were able to enjoy it. Your family was able to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of build up to it, and it's interesting because like you think that like when you lose someone, the moments that you're gonna miss them the most are like the holidays, the birthdays, the anniversaries,
build up.
It's
the
the
weddings.
leading up.
It's like no, it's the leading up, and it's like the mundane moments, like the number of times, especially in like that first year of not having Liam, like that I would call his phone, and it wouldn't be until I heard his voice on the voicemail that like my heart would go through the floor, and I'm realizing like, oh my god, I haven't heard him speak to me, and so like he's gone. What am I doing? And just like not even cluing in that like he's not gonna pick up. And I think it was like those moments for me that were the hardest. But when it came to the wedding, it was like, I don't know, there was so much mental prep in it, and I think I had so many meltdowns leading up to it. I'm not gonna lie, like the relationship that I had with my brother was like, I think 1 in a million when it comes to siblings, and I'm like so grateful for that, and to be able to like know that in his short life, like as I get older, like the relationship I had with my brother was amazing.
Yeah,
and
impactful.
Like he was my best friend, and I was so proud of him.
And you took a lot away from it.
Influence and like like I just like, and I'm living differently because of him. Like I'm intentional with who I am and like how I show up because of my love for him.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
that's so motivating. Like you are like changing my life right now. I just want you to know that your perspective is so beautiful, and like I feel like I too get in such a rut. You know, I'm still in that anger, very angry at times, and like just hearing your perspective on it, you know, like I've got to find joy. Even in the darkest of moments, I have to find it.
Feel reassurance from Erin though right now that has not always been the case.
No.
And it took you a really long time to get there.
Absolutely. No, for sure. I guess it just feels,
you have the choice.
It feels good to know that I'm not like you hear it all the time. Like, you're not alone. You know, this is common thing when we experience loss, but just to have somebody sitting next to me and feeling it very similar to the way I've felt it with a tragedy. It just hits differently, I guess. So thank you. It resonates.
Aww. That's so impactful. That's wonderful. Did you guys do anything to honor him at your wedding?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, so actually, I'm like the friend who's like, I'm woo-woo, but I can also be woo-hoo. Like I can do a little bit of both. So woo-woo in the sense, okay, context. I got a new job. 2 weeks later, my Liam's accident happened. Actually, side note, I also might have ADD. We talked about this earlier. So like I just, the one thing that I like, you just don't get it unless you've gone through something so thick. And like it's wild to me. Like think of like what we've talked about, and like I'm thinking in my mind like what I've shared, and like how like then you just go on casually talking. Like it's just like you don't really realize, and like to me that's a perfect example of like how like multiple emotions can coexist at the same
healing
time.
Too, right? Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's also like I never would have been able to share what I shared earlier.
Do you ever find when you share your experience with people that they cry and you kind of don't like there's obviously there's emotions there, but you just it's healing. Really. So I'm for sure. I haven't actually shared with too many people like what happened to Liam. Thank you for sharing.
Like in the hospital, they know he was coma, and then donor. Like that was
a donor. Wow.
I forgot to mention that.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, we'll come back. What did you just ask?
I wanted to know how you honored him at your wedding.
We'll come back to the wedding.
You were talking about woo-woo.
Woo-woo and woo-hoo. Okay, so we'll come back to the wedding honoring. But yes, Liam was an organ donor, so he started like a crazy movement.
Did he make that choice before he passed away?
Yeah, he did.
Are you one?
Yes.
I am too.
Yeah.
Same.
So
Proud.
Look at
you
us.
need to know,
Yes.
what you need to know is you need to make sure that your family knows that that's what you want.
Okay.
Because what we learned is even though Liam said yes to everything,
Yeah.
like they had to get consent from my parents. Like,
Wow.
and he was 22. It's not like he was 18.
No.
Like your next of kin or whomever like
Yeah.
has to consent to the
To
organ
this.
donation.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing that like we learned through this process is there's a lot of people who like pull that out and are like, no, like I can't do it. And like it's a hard thing to sometimes wrap your head around in the moment, but like
Yeah.
the impact and the life that it can give to someone,
Yeah.
like we haven't gotten that contact from a
I was
donor,
gonna
which
say-
is like so heartbreaking. Like I just like someday I hope that we do.
Yeah.
You might like.
Yeah, but he saved 5 lives or
Oh my
donated 5 lives.
God.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and my mom might call me and be like, "You're missing one." I don't know, but yeah, he donated both his kidneys, I believe his liver.
Wow.
We really wanted to donate his heart
Yeah.
because, like, obviously you don't get a young working heart too often.
Yeah.
But because he was on like 16 different IVs, like
It was.
you
It's
couldn't.
too,
We would
yeah.
have had to like keep him on life support for like another few weeks, and I
To get
think
that
that was just like, yeah.
Too much.
Not ethical.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, not ethical. So
No, that's fair.
anyways, yeah, he was an organ donor, but it was really cool actually. So like over the last 2 years, like I will get like just the most powerful messages from people. And I got this message from a girl who was an organ recipient. And she was
Okay.
around Liam's age. She went to Queen's. And so she went to her appointment like with her doctor in Toronto, and she was wearing a Queen sweater. And she sat in on the appointment, and he looks at her and he goes like, "Did you know Liam Geddes?" And she goes, "Not personally, but like, yes. like, I
Obviously
know
impact.
him."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he was like, "You have no idea how much that one person, like, I've never seen such an increase in
Wow.
organ donors, like, since
Wow.
he died." And I
That's
just
amazing.
like we shared about it, like, constantly. And, like, we were proud of him for it. And, like, it was his decision. And, like, we
Yeah.
supported it. But, like, the number of people who, like, kind of in support, like, you know, when you, like, send flowers to a
Yeah.
family, like,
Yeah.
people became organ donors.
Start doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like,
Absolutely.
They were like, yeah, like, let's do this. And it's so wild because not a lot of families talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think just because like we've experienced so much loss in
Yeah.
the last several years that we had these conversations. Like we knew that Liam didn't want to be buried. Like we knew that Liam wanted to be an organ donor.
I love
like,
that. I
it
think
was
that's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Way to go, Liam.
Flower honoring or wedding honoring? Okay.
Yes.
Woo-woo
Yes.
story. All right. So back to the.
I love you.
Yeah, we do love
We
you.
really like you. You are so fun. I'm like, move next
out with
door,
us.
hang out with us. Yeah.
Deal. It is a bit of a commute, guys, so I don't get here every day. But yeah. So, anyways, had my job for 2 weeks. Liam's accident, and then Liam's accident was like March 4th, 5th. Came off life support March 11th. We moved into our new house March 14th. So it was
Wow.
like, you know how they say like the biggest stressors in the world are like new job, death, new house,
Yeah.
marriage. Yeah,
Everything.
I crossed all those off in like the span
Get
of a
it
year and a
over
half.
with.
No
Yeah.
wonder
Like,
you
I
were.
was like, yeah, my therapy bills were tall.
Oh.
Gotta keep them in business. So yeah, we walked into the house for the first time, like after we bought it, or once we got it on March 11th or March 14th. And it smelled like a greenhouse, and like not a like Febreze air freshener. The owner came in and sprayed it.
Yeah.
It smelled like a greenhouse. And if I can remember, it smelled like that for days. Like, and we couldn't figure it out. We're like, what? Where is
Wow.
that smell coming from? Anyways, a few months later, my friend had gone to a medium. I kind of wasn't super ready for any of that stuff at that time.
Yeah.
But she went to a medium, and Liam came through at the very end. And one of the things he said to her was, whenever you smell flowers and not the cheap shit you see at funerals, that's me letting you know I'm there. And that it would be, and it's
I have
funny
goosebumps.
because the flowers at his funeral were like so beautiful, but a part of me in my mind, I remember being like, Liam would have preferred, like I like could picture
Yeah.
a vision for him, but I just like whatever, I wasn't a part of the flower picking. But I just remember thinking like just how Liam
That
was.
would want
ironic
it.
thought,
Particular,
but that's
yeah.
so interesting that you
Yeah.
had that thought and
Yeah.
then that presented.
I know. And then whenever she told me this, I was like, she's like, this doesn't really mean anything to me. Like, I'm like, means something to me. Like, what
Yeah.
the heck? Like, so then I was just like dumbfounded.
Yeah.
And it's really crazy. Like, sometimes I'll get a whiff of like florals, and I'm like, why?
Yeah,
And like,
out of nowhere.
we have chickens, and like, they do not smell like flowers. And like, one day I was like walking out to the chicken coop, and it was like an overwhelming
Hey,
smell
Liam.
of like, roses. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just was like, whoa.
What
like,
a comfort.
yeah. So then at my wedding, how I honored him like was my bouquet. So I was very intentional about like the flowers that I picked. So
Yes.
I had white anemones. I always mispronounce those. So those are partly because like they're a symbol of like remembrance, right?
Yeah.
But that, and then I also had a chair that was like, basically it looked like it was like overgrown with the same florals.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was going to be at the head table, but again, people are, I don't want to call them like non-grievers, but like people who've never gone through like significant loss or trauma can make them uncomfortable. So like, and I didn't really love the idea, like we have lost so many people over the last few years. Like I didn't love the idea of like a table of like all these people that weren't there. Like it just it wasn't going to bring me the comfort that I wanted. So the flowers was a nice way of like, I held him with me all day, but then like I also had it like
you were pictured as well with it, right? With him and
everything. Yeah.
Have you seen a medium yourself? I'm curious.
Yes.
How did you find the experience?
Incredible.
Yeah.
Have you ever?
Yeah, I found it was the most healing out of this whole journey for me.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm like, feel like I'm ready to seek out again, but yeah,
it was mind blowing. It's just like wild. Like I think, like I've never, like I didn't grow up in a religious household. Like I didn't have strong beliefs of any kind. And it's just like there's some things in life that you can't explain with science.
No. Have you ever seen, we actually had Jenny Duranics on, and she was the medium that read for me for Gwendolyn.
Really?
Prior to, like, we really didn't have any connection. So when I met with her, and then we started the podcast shortly after. So she was probably on this about a year ago almost.
Yeah.
And you should
More
really,
than a year ago.
you should really tune in and listen to her, because she was incredible. Like the things, I mean, she's a phenomenal person, but to be able to touch into what she does is it's phenomenal.
I'm a skeptic sometimes, but she has said some really like mind-blowing
she said
things
some
that it's, like,
mind-blowing
you
things,
just can't deny like certain things that like have so much relevance, right?
I
Like,
could blow your mind with some.
tell us,
enlighten us.
So Liam's obituary, like growing up, like Harry Potter.
Okay.
You guys know Harry Potter?
have we been to Kingston? Do we know Harry?
Okay, I'm just making sure
I'm gonna
that
make
we
a
can still
confession.
be friends. You want to be friends, and I'm just going through my checklist.
I, however, have only seen the last movie.
So, anyways, there's this like scene with like, I think it's Sirius Black to Harry Potter. These are characters. If you know Harry Potter, you know. And he basically says like, the ones that love us never really leave us.
Yeah.
So that was the saying that we had for like Liam's obituary, and it's on his urn and everything like that.
Yeah.
I have it tattooed.
Okay.
And so does my mom and my sister. And like Liam is very like much associated to Harry Potter. So anyways, we move into this new house, right? So like that's the 14th, I believe. Like the funeral was the following weekend. So it was like the first Saturday morning in like the house. And I just remember like saying to myself, like, how the fuck am I going to get through this?
Yeah.
Like, just like literally, and we have a huge window. You've seen it.
Yes.
Go to my Instagram. It's available every day. But it's this massive front window, and I was like looking across, and again, like this new home, I'm just taking it in, and I like look across the road. And do you know the scene where like the Patronus approaches from like the other side of the lake?
Yeah.
And it like kind of steps into an opening, and it's a deer.
Yeah.
Right? And then it turns out to be Harry Potter, and like the whole representation is it's like he's seeing like
he thought it was his dad, but it's him.
Like it was his own strength that like came back to help him.
Yeah.
So that's the symbolism behind all of it. So I'm looking at this opening and I'm like, oh my God, that reminds me so much of that scene. Well, doesn't a fucking deer step into the middle of it after I'm like asking myself, how am I going to get through this?
Oh my
and that
God.
happens. And I was like, literally like, Mitchell! And he's never seen Harry Potter. He's like, what are you talking about?
Is that a deer?
Yeah.
Is that a deer?
I'm like, tell me you see this. And it was just like wild. Like it was so wild. And then there was another time too.
Oh my God.
Related to the whole deer thing where I just like, I had like a meltdown of a day, and we have woods, and I like went to the back, and like I'm like screaming in the woods.
Sometimes you ever find yourself in the woods and you don't even remember being there, but you definitely were there, like floating.
Yeah. And like I'm like so angry, I'm so upset, and I'm not upset with my husband, but I'm just like screaming and crying and angry at like what our life is, and I'm so mad. And then like literally 20 feet from us, a deer steps into the woods. Like I was like, what? I am like screaming.
Are you not afraid of me?
I'm like, what the heck? And then a second one comes, and I just was like, what
God.
the heck is happening? And we had our dog, and he's a hunting dog, like he's a lab, and Nelson didn't even bark. He didn't even bark. He just sat down, and like we held him, and we just stared at the deers, and he literally just watched them. Like he wasn't even like, on game mode, like looking at the deer, like, "Hey, let me know when I'm ready to go."
Yeah.
He was just like, "Oh yeah."
Oh my God.
So that was crazy.
That's
and then
amazing.
when I eventually went to the medium, they were like, he kind of came through he did come through at the end, very like briefly, and she was like, "Oh my God, like he's hilarious. He's trying to help me figure out like to tell you who he is so that you'll know he's a young guy." And I'm like kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, like this is probably him, but again, there could be other young guys that we've lost in our life and stuff like that. And so then she goes, "Okay, do you know Harry Potter?" I was like,
I know?
And I'm like
Potter.
wearing a hoodie. Like, there's no way. Like, I've never met this lady in my life. Like, ever. I had to drive like an hour and a half, 2 hours to go see her. Wow. So she can't even like see me. Like, I'm like in my sweater, like holding the cuffs of my sweater, like holding myself.
Oh my God.
And she's like, "He's told me that like if I say that, you'll know who he is." And I just was like,
Absolutely, I do.
I figured it out. Thanks.
Oh.
So if you need
wow, that is insane.
It, like,
I need
that's
this
what I
lady's
mean
number.
though. Like I definitely like I mean like I'm skeptical, but like I definitely believe I believe that like that's what I'm saying. Like there's just some things that, exactly what you said, you can't explain, and it's so relevant, and it's just unbelievable in my mind to think that like you say it all the time that like energy can't be destroyed.
It can't be created or just
and it's just crazy to think that like it's just crazy. I started watching, I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate this in a good way, but I've sent them to you, I think, that I've watched this girl with dowsing rods, and she's asking like the universe questions, and it's like yes or no, and like saying like, do people attend their funerals? Yes. Like, is that
like, is that what you're going to do for your new?
No.
Okay, sorry.
You're not going to guess it. I didn't tell Erin.
Or is it tarot card reading?
No.
Palm reading.
She's like, you can't be a therapist. I'm like, I'm not going to be a therapist.
Even though you're mine, you cannot be.
I guess like a little sneak peek that there's a new business on the way, but but Tamara's not going to guess it.
But the energy thing. So my grandma used to be able to do that with just her hands.
Yeah. It's
she crazy
was able
to be witching out wells and stuff with just her arms.
Aliens are also real, and there's aliens under Area 51.
Erin, I want you to talk to us about your Bloomprint.
Yeah, I want to hear about like life now
and what is it and everything about it. And this goddamn mic keeps falling on me.
Do you want to trade?
Slouching underneath it. Okay, 1 second.
I know. I move 100 times.
Okay, so ironically enough, you know how we talked about shock earlier?
Yes.
So I think that there's like immediate shock, like obviously like in a traumatic event where you're shocked, you're experiencing shock, you're checked out, you're dissociated. But then there's like the shock of the first few months after you lose someone, where it's not really real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's
not at all
until like the food drop-off stop, like the check-in stop, the frequent conversations you're expected to perform at work, like life just goes back to normal.
Yeah. And how could it? Right.
Yeah,
but it does.
Exactly. And so in that time, I had started an Instagram account called Sink to Swim.
Okay.
Because,
yes. That was the OG one. Yes.
Yeah. So, sorry.
No, you're good. I'm like, let me rub your feet.
The whole messaging behind that was like, Sink to Swim is something that I told myself. So it's basically the idea that like, whenever you're learning to swim for the first time, like when you're drowning, what do you naturally do? You scream for help. Like you put your arm out, you take the vest, you take the help, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to get afloat. You need to keep your head above
Absolutely.
water. But when we're like metaphorically drowning in our life, we're like, we resist it. And we're like, we don't need help. I'm just going to do this on my own.
What a powerful
message. Yeah.
So then but then you're going to get to this point, and it's the same with physical swimming, metaphorical swimming, whatever you want to look at, is you're going to hit this point where like, you can let go of those helps. You can let go of the flotation device, and you can tread water with no problems. And like, maybe it's still a little bit of weight, but like you're still able to do it on your own.
To do it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, whenever I would like hit a wall or just like have a rough day, I would just be like, sink to swim, baby, sink to swim.
Yeah.
So
keep swimming.
Started. Yeah. And that's a big saying too, like with my family and Liam, because it's something my mom always used to say to us was just keep swimming. So like, that's where I have that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm showing a Just Keep Swimming bracelet with Liam's, my last name too.
Yeah. You.
But the men's rugby at Queens, they've got these made. So we have them.
Beautiful.
But yeah. But anyways, so that's kind of where my first vision of like, I'm going to turn my pain to purpose.
Yes.
But that was in the shock months of like, oh, I'm good. I'm fine.
I got this. I can help other people now.
I can talk about my grief.
Yeah.
Of course I can.
Absolutely.
And no, I could not. So I hit a wall. And like I said, like rock bottom's basement became a very comfortable place for me for a really long time. But I knew, like, even before Liam died, like, I wanted my own business. Like, I wanted my own coaching. My mom's a therapist. I had inspiration from her, my professional work. Like, I wanted to take it to the next level because, like, my biggest issue is when it comes to my job is there's so much red tape. There's so much policy and there's so much, like, you can do this.
Bullshit politics. Yeah.
Oh, God. Don't even get started. So, like, I knew that, like, I wanted to help people and I wanted to change their lives, but, like, I wanted to do it on my terms.
Yeah, on yours.
So that's kind of where the Bloomprint started. And, like, going back to the whole reference around flowers, like, that's where Bloom was kind of inserted.
I love that.
And then the idea of blueprint, but Bloomprint is about, like, showing people actually how to change their life and actually how to accomplish, like, a life full of abundance that's aligned with, like, who they are.
Yeah.
So it kind of started out in, like, the world of, like, life coaching and everything like that, but it's also kind of transformed into business as well.
Yeah.
So what I've noticed is, like, a lot of the people who seem to be attracted to me and come to me are, like, the self-starters, but they're like fed up, they're unfulfilled, they're overwhelmed,
they don't know what direction to go.
Yeah.
I'm
multi-passionate, I like everything, like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And so kind of, like, helping them, like, kind of pick a lane and get into that. But, like,
we should have a meeting after that.
create something that's, like, super aligned with, like, who they are. So it's interesting. What started out as, like, life coaching has, like, also developed into, like, business coaching and branding, because one of my
branding,
things that
marketing,
I, like, absolutely love is, like, having an authentic brand, because I think, like, if you're able to convey a very authentic, genuine self online, like, you are going to see success with whatever service or products that you have.
Yeah.
So teaching people how to embrace their story, embrace their journey, and actually be a human being behind whatever it is that they're trying to market has kind of been where it's gone recently. So yeah, I'm just riding the waves.
I love that. I love
which
that.
is a saying.
Yeah.
Well, like, small business, right? Like, especially, like, people want to make, like, personal, you know, like, personal connections, especially in, like, a world of social media
and trust.
Yeah. And I think, like, I show my face a lot on social media on the business, and I talk about mental health a lot, and have been
because
able,
the people want to know the person, right? They want to know who that is.
And I think that and I get actually a lot of feedback about that, and, like, showing a lot of, like, vulnerable moments, even about, you know, not just personal, but about business and, like, struggles in business. And so that has actually, like been really therapeutic to show up in that way, and also not feel inauthentic, right? And, like, you're just putting out this brand, but it's not really, like, a part of you.
Like, you know what my biggest pet peeve is when you see someone online and then you see them in person and you're like, what the fuck?
I know. Or they, like, seem really nice online, and then you see them at the
It's almost as worse as, like, when people engage with you so much online and then you see them in person, they're like,
I hate that.
You don't exist.
Yeah.
They're like,
I don't see you.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey there.
I agree. I just literally assume that this is one thing, because there was a lot of points in my business that everything was online.
Right.
So I know people's handles, but I don't know their faces. Right? So whenever I go out in public, literally, I assume I know everyone. Seriously. So if I'm at Shoppers, like, I was at Shoppers the other day, and I was like, oh, you look a little familiar. Hi, how are you doing? And, like, then based on her response, I was like, I don't know you,
but I know your handle.
But I could have.
But at least I wasn't a bitch.
You feel good about being friendly.
No. So that is great. I love the story, and I love, like, I think that you would be so talented at that, because you've put so much thought in, like, metaphor into your work. And so that's incredible.
I mean, like, I have to ask you, it's like being motivated on a daily basis is hard. And even especially when you have trauma. So what helps you motivate, like, others and be
accountable,
inspired?
Yeah. I think,
like, surely there's got to be some days and you're like, I don't even want to show up for myself.
For sure. And I think it's again, like, going back to the whole resisting thing. Like, it's a balance between, like, not letting yourself make excuses and having boundaries with that, like, reminding yourself, like, this is what you said you wanted to do when you were having a good day. You're just having a bad day right now.
It's not going to last.
So
you're going to have another one.
What are you going to do today that's going to contribute forward to what you're wanting to achieve, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also, like, realistic. Like, there are some days where, like, I wake up and I'm like, fuck it. I'm not doing it. Like, I'm
not doing life today. Yeah.
And I think you just have to, like, again, you are a human behind the brand. You're a human behind the business. You're a human behind the coach.
Being honest.
And, like, just being honest. Like, I think at the end of the day, too, like, you're gonna have a lot less issues with motivation and burnout when you're doing something that you actually love to do,
Very true.
that you actually love
Yeah.
to do, that actually aligns with what
Yeah.
you like value and what you're passionate about. Because there's so many things that we say we like to do, but when it comes down to it, we're like,
I had
I love that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, like, one thing I've noticed is like, I need to be a lot more intentional and clear around like my marketing for one-to-one coaching, because there's specific people that I enjoy working with,
Right.
and then there's people who I don't necessarily enjoy working with.
Yeah.
And that's just because like we're
not meshing,
we're
like,
not
which is
meshing.
okay.
Yeah, it's like, I need you to be like, you need to be ready for the changes that I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you that you need to
Yeah.
make, like, kind of thing. Like,
Being
you
accountable.
have to be
Open.
ambitious and like ready and like that fire.
You need
But-
to match that personality
Yes,
too.
But I think sometimes in the world of like self-development and motivation and lifestyle coaching and stuff like that, you kind of get the people who they just want a sounding board. They just want to kind
Yeah.
of like vent it out, but they're not really ready to change.
So Joe and I actually had this conversation today that that there was like a counselor situation, and they're like, I'm not going to do this work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, to be called out in that way, right?
sure.
Where like a lot of times like you go, so a life coach, sorry. A lot of times you go and you're like talking, right? Or just whatever. And they're like I had said, like, I've been to counseling for like probably like 9 months, maybe.
Yeah.
And like, I actually have never felt like I've never been held accountable for anything in those sessions. And then
What is it benefiting you?
yeah, it's I just talking about it, but like in terms of like the actual action piece. So I hear what you're saying. Erin and I talked about this before we started, and like I hear you're saying is to be more intentional with people you want to work
Yeah.
with. I told Erin to just raise her price.
Yeah. But also like, you're going to attract the people who are ready for it.
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
Which is good.
And I
Yeah.
think it's like, it's unique, like between like a life coach and therapist. It's like the coach is going to be the no bullshit, like call you on yourself, like hold you to
Absolutely.
a higher standard. Whereas like the therapist might like kind of hold you a little bit
Nurture
more
you
and like
more.
nurture you and like listen. Whereas like coaching, it's like I'm actively like,
Which I
guiding
think
you.
is
we
great.
have a goal which we want to achieve.
Yes.
I think that people like can get stuck in therapy and counseling.
Oh, for sure.
Like that's kind of how I feel right now too, because I'm like, okay, we're not really like hashing anything out. Like we're not doing like any exercises. We're not really like moving beyond like what happened last week and like how that made me feel. And you're not telling me anything I don't know. So I feel like the life coach piece, which will link your info, is actually like so much like such a better direction if
100%
you've
holds you
done
accountable.
100%.
yeah, for some people, right, who have kind of done that work of acceptance.
Yeah.
And then where do we go from now?
100%.
Yeah, I
Like,
love
what
that.
advice do you give to people that want to aspire to be in the position that you're in by helping others or doing personal life
Like,
coaching?
what's the goals for
Just
your...
do it.
Yeah.
Like for anyone who wants to do what I'm doing,
Yeah.
don't wait.
Yeah.
Because like
Because that's intimidating.
it's so intimidating. And I think
I'd be
what I'm
scared
struggling
shitless.
with right now, it's like
Yeah.
I have my full-time career. I have
Yes.
this that feels like a full-time career.
Absolutely.
I have other endeavors that I do as well. And it's a lot. And then in
Yeah.
between all that, like,
You have emotional commitments and
right,
family
emotional
commitments
commitment,
and
relationships, therapy, grief,
Yeah.
like
Your own.
all these different things, like your period. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Let's
just
fucking
like,
get down to that.
we gotta
Yeah.
sync up. We gotta sync
We're
up
off
here.
about 10
Sync up
days
the
a
work.
month.
Yeah.
We're good for about 20. Yeah.
So it's just like there's so much
to consider.
right now in the season that I'm in that I'm like I'm getting to that point where I'm like, okay, I gotta narrow down. Like,
Absolutely.
am
It's
I
good that you
going
can recognize
in all in
that.
on this.
Yeah.
And I think I will be, like, that's the goal, obviously.
Absolutely.
But it's scary because like when you're your own boss and like you're an entrepreneur or you're in sales or marketing or whatever that is, no matter your service or product, like it's on you.
Yeah.
It's on you to show up. It's
Yeah.
on you to convert. It's on you to give
Wow.
enough
Yeah.
value that people want to invest in. And like
trust.
when you have
Trust that.
self-confidence, and like we all have self-confidence. No one on this couch can sit here and tell me that we don't. Like we all struggle with
I
self-confidence.
say
at
fake
some
it
point,
till you
right?
make it, though.
Yes.
Like that is
100%.
important.
But it's like that fear of like,
Being
am I going to be good
rejected,
enough?
too.
And am I going to be rejected? So it's an interesting place to be in. But like if I can give someone advice who wants to start to pursue it, is start making it happen. If you don't know how to do it, learn how you can do it. If you want a life coach to learn from them, hire a life coach. Like you have to invest in yourself and you have to invest in your business when you get started. And I think the people who are serious about it understand that, and the people who are kind of serious about it aren't willing to accept that.
I agree.
Chills.
I agree.
Jesus, Erin.
Erin, yeah, you literally like
this.
Did we do good?
Is that just not like? Is that not amazing? We've already flown like way through. I mean, I'm telling.
I feel like I've been with you your entire life.
Covered everything.
I know.
And you had a lot to share.
How just fast it goes.
And one thing I feel like I really like have taken away from this is I really enjoyed your metaphors and like you're just like
your
deeper
energy.
Thinking on things. I think that that's been like really like a nice, interesting, fresh perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You and Tamara got to share quotes together and bond over that.
And our sick jokes when it
Up
comes
next,
to trauma.
group tattoos. Yeah. No, we're really grateful. And like, as I said before,
we're so thankful. Like, I'm so thankful that you made this trip. I was
we're
like, you
really
know what? We
privileged.
need to have her. Like this, I was like preaching. I was like, guys, like we have to have her. We need to check out her profile, sending both of them to her, to them. And just, I was like, she's just, you're just a different soul.
And I really like seeing too. I'm like, let me give you 10 compliments before you go. One thing that I really like.
We're gonna toot your horn a bit. Toot.
But it's nice, like, as like a friend to Tamara too, because I know that like you still are on this journey and so are you.
Yeah, always.
But just like and I'm sure that like, you know, we get a glimpse that I know every day is not this way.
A highlight reel.
But that perspective, you know, and I think for Tamara too, like this is so like valuable for her to know that these moments also exist.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just such a full circle because, you know, we lost like our loved ones essentially a month and, you know, between the two, and it's just to follow you and to reach out and to be like, I'm feeling this way today, or I can relate to what you posted, or, you know, oh my goodness, I get what you're saying, to like having you on this couch. It's just so crazy.
Such an honor.
You know, it's just, again, like such a full circle moment. So thank you for
coming
on, and
we'll make sure we link your coaching and link your Instagram if that's okay.
Yeah, my Instagram personal handle is Erin Geddes, so ERINGEDDES, and then at the @Bloomprint.
Yes.
Love that.
And don't forget, you guys, to like and subscribe. We all, you know, we love the support. So
I forgot about the camera.
Yeah. It's been here the whole time. Okay, guys, thank you. We'll see you in the next one.